only one school in the Oklahoma City School District is air-conditioned. The other 99 simply open the windows for cool air. There are not enough fans for each classroom at many of the schools, so while the mercury climbs outside, the temperature becomes sweltering inside. For many students, like these kindergartners, adjusting to the new school year means first overcoming the heat, and that's tough. Tough enough to warrant a shorter school day, according to Dave Renfro, president of the American Federation of Teachers. He says the heat is causing some real problems.
We've had one teacher that we know of has passed out from the heat. We have had numerous reports of students that are either ill to the point that they have thrown up or have passed out in class. Actual numbers I couldn't give you a count, but I had more than 30 phone calls yesterday, all complaining on the same issue in regard to the intense heat and the nauseousness as a result.
Oklahoma City school officials told Action 4 if the school days are shortened a few hours, it will begin on Tuesday at the earliest, and students will have to make up the time at the end of the school year. Debbie Mash, Action 4 at Wilson Elementary School.
The state of Oklahoma does not have a fair housing statute. The federal fair housing statute does not cover age, and so that although in about 12 states across the country have statutes that protect families with children or protect people on the basis of age, Oklahoma does not.
This has come to be the standard view of Mount St. Helens from the north across Spirit Lake. Here where the trees were knocked flat 2.5 years ago, where shrubs are making enough of a comeback now to bloom in the late summer sun. Closer to the crater, across the vast pumice desert where a whole side of the mountain is buried, underground water steams to the surface from hot rocks below. This day, the U.S. Geological Survey said we could join their crater crew, working there on the south side of the lava dome, a dome that has grown now to nearly cover the floor of the crater. As the helicopter landed here 6,000 feet above sea level, we realized that if this dome keeps growing, the geologists will soon be driven out, unable to work in what they call the backside of the dome. As it was, our helicopter could not stay. It had to fly out to a safe distance. But even this departure gave us a chance to demonstrate the size of this place. With the helicopter gone, we had expected to be left in silence. What we found instead was the most awesome part of our visit. The walls of the crater, a 2,000-foot-high horseshoe of stratified cliffs, were alive with falling rocks. Some rock falls were as loud as gunshots, the distance from us so great we saw the strikes before we heard the sound. That sound kept up the whole 2.5 hours we were in the crater. We set off, picking a treacherous path through a cavern of pumice and dacite rock, much of it thrown down here during the last eruption August 17th. And we found that even those who come here often feel a certain awe and amazement when they stand in boots warmed by the crater floor, in steam swirling up their pant legs, there beside a 700-foot-high dome of new earth.
Every time you come in after an eruption, you're amazed at the changes. The scale of the movements are so large, and it's always gawking and everything.
This very large rock, big as a house, certainly, rolled down here during the last eruption about 2 weeks ago. And as it did, it cut a very deep trench, about 10 feet deep, and came to rest right here. And since then, it's cracked, and you can see heat rising from the crack. As it continues to cool, it will break down even more until it's broken down into very small pieces. The eruption that threw down these massive boulders also destroyed many of the instruments that scientists like Christina Helliker had used to predict it so precisely. So their assignment this day was to replace markers on the highest rocks of the dome.
It's just a painted board with a prism reflector on it, and this is used to return the laser beam that we shoot up to it.
Bill Chadwick's job was to climb the lava dome that now caps the Mount St. Helens magma vent to put those markers in place.
We have a higher tolerance for danger than most people probably, but it's part of the job.
The precise laser measurements Christina Helliker takes now will be compared with others from the same location in the weeks ahead. And when she starts seeing big changes in the rate of movement, we'll know another eruption is very close.
Why do it? Why? I mean, what's necessary here?
Predictions have obvious use for determining risk, to lives and property of people and things around the volcano. Also, well, the more we understand this particular volcano, the more we can maybe understand other volcanoes around the world. From a personal standpoint, it's fascinating.
Awe-inspiring is more the word. From the largest scientific laboratory in the world, I'm Neil Rose now in Mount St. Helens for NBC News.
About 2 months ago, Oklahoma farmers were wanting the continuous rains to stop. The excess moisture delayed wheat harvest 3 to 4 weeks, and some fields were never even harvested. Now farmers are at odds with Mother Nature again, and it's certainly not because of too much rain.
Ben, it really is dry. We've been waiting for rain for quite a while, and we've been over at ground several times.
Keith Krittenbrink, who farms near Okarche, says he's ready to start planting. Even though he says he's ready, his land isn't. It's just too dry.
In order to get a good seed bed, you have to have these clods all broke up here. You're going to have some rain. We might have to go risk ground another time or two yet before we can even sow wheat, unless we have a real hard rain, and that'll kind of dissolve these clods. But, it's going to take a couple inches of rain to get this stuff in shape to sow.
The Okarche farmer says if he hasn't gotten some moisture by mid-October, he'll just dust his wheat crop in. Krittenbrink points out that young farmers and the old-timers agree that this has been a strange year for weather. Ben McCain, Action 4, Okarche.
Those people who lived in the shadow of the Youngblood Hotel can remember when it was a hospital before a travel lodge. In its heyday, the hotel sparkled with big-name guests and Southern hospitality. Last night, it glittered under a new light, that of a raging fire which totally consumed the old landmark. 3 alarms would eventually be sounded as over 70 firemen fought to contain the fire. Built almost entirely of wood, the 4-story building gave firemen a hot, dangerous fight. Collapsing walls, low water pressure, and downed power lines were more problems to fight along with the flames. As the Youngblood Hotel gradually turned to ashes, it became apparent that perhaps the biggest fire of the year so far in Oklahoma City could have been intentionally set.
Neighbors reported the sound of the fire starting in several places at the same time, several whoosh sounds, and as quickly as it got a head start on us and as many areas of the building as seemed to be involved in fire, we would strongly suspect to set fire.
This morning, the fire department finished what urban renewal had begun, the demolition of the famed hotel.
Yeah, it is down.
Arson investigators will have to sift through the debris to find out exactly what started the fire. A dollar loss hasn't yet been tallied. Because the building was abandoned and in the process of being torn down, fire department spokesmen say the dollar figure will probably be low, but that one must be assigned if this fire is to be investigated as arson. As the remains here cool, the once proud Youngblood Hotel will fade from memory. But last night's barn burner of a fire won't be forgotten in this neighborhood for a good while. Tony Stizza, Action 4 at Northeast 4th and Stiles.
Of course, the work that they normally do will not get done until they come back to work. That's true of our collection division and our criminal investigation division and our EP and EO group. And that amounts to about 133 employees here in Oklahoma City.
So when these people come back...
Broadway musicals do well at the Civic Center. They bring a touch of New York City to the Midwest. Most of the time, they bring a background of critical acclaim. Tonight's performance brought along another background.
Program. Oh, Calcutta program.
Oh, Calcutta. The very name makes some people shudder. 10 years ago, it was banned from Oklahoma City. 4 years ago, it made its run, but not without legal hassles. That was the whole problem with the 1978 tour. This year, they're doing quite well.
Thank you.
We could only shoot a rehearsal. During performance, the opening is done with just robes. That's what's made it controversial. But things have changed. They've always sold tickets, but this year the legal problems are minimal.
I think that the district attorneys are accepting it more, yeah. We did have about 35 problem areas in 1978. We've had 2 in this tour. This has been out 6 months.
Charles, I haven't heard anything from anybody. I didn't even know the show was coming to town.
The music has changed some in the 14 years old Calcutta has been on Broadway, but the show hasn't. It hasn't had to. People seem to like it just the way it is. Charles Schnitzer, Action 4.
It's hard to believe, but this man is 37 years old. His name, Bobby Berger. He was the world champion saddle bronc rider in 1979. The past 16 years, he's qualified for the National Finals Rodeo held in Oklahoma City 14 times. One of the reasons he continues to look so young, he says, is because he enjoys his work. Even though he enjoys riding, he's close to 40 years old. And this rodeo star from Lexington, Oklahoma, knows he's facing retirement.
rodeo is just like any other sport. It's a short-lived career. There's a few years there when you're real good at it and do real well, and comes a time when you're going to have to move on to something else. And people have been asking me for the last 15 years what I'm going to do when I get done rodeoing, and that's something I've never been able to really answer them.
But Berger can answer that question now. In fact, he told us on Action 4 AM that he and his wife have just opened a western wear store in Norman. He's also teaching in some rodeo schools, and he has a cattle operation near Lexington. He knows retirement is coming, but in the meantime, he'll continue to fly his own plane to and from rodeos across the country and compete with the younger cowboys. Ben McCain, Action 4. Oklahoma and Taiwan officials signed agreements totaling $18.6 million. It was the fourth trade package the state has signed with Taiwan and was by far the largest.
It's significant today that this is just a continued part of our relationship and the economic ties that we have between the two countries. And that you have come to Oklahoma right here in the heartland of America is particularly significant.
The Vice Minister of Economic Affairs for Taiwan said the group originally had planned to buy only 1 million bushels of soybeans, but decided to double its purchase of the beans. On the wheat deal, the director of the Oklahoma Wheat Commission is pleased that Taiwan Flour Mills Association is going to pay $4.5 million for almost 1 million bushels of wheat. Last year, Oklahoma farmers produced about 218 million bushels. So Taiwan's purchase of 1 million bushels is just a drop in the bucket. However, Mike Kubitschek says it's always important to remember that 8 out of 10 acres produced in this state must be exported. So we should look at every deal overseas as a positive one. Ben McCain, Action 4.
A lot of people dread this moment. The thought of having a radiation examination isn't soothing. No one really knows just how harmful the exposure is, and that thought doesn't help. But all the concern over exposure may be changing. A new crystal screen can now cut your exposure to radiation by over half. And unlike many advancements in the medical field, this one won't break your pocketbook.
It shouldn't reflect any cost changes of an increased cost factor to the patient at all. What makes it unique is the focused crystals within the intensifying screen, which in turn allows you to reduce your exposure.
And the final picture looks good. Although the screen cuts radiation, it produces a clear X-ray, and that's important. It helps the doctors help you. Debbie Mash, Action 4 at Mercy Health Center.
The city leaders were expecting the council chambers to be packed with animal lovers today, since Oklahoma City has proposed selling dogs and cats from city shelters to the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center. The animals would be used for medical research. Perhaps most of the protesters knew the council had already decided to defer the proposal for 2 weeks. One person did speak out on the subject, but was asked to limit her comments to the deferral request.
I think we're going to have to change the name of the Oklahoma City Animal Shelter, the Oklahoma City Way Station, to Medical Research. Our animal shelter is through. I've had people calling.
Now, Ms. Gregory, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to rule the discussion on the substance of the contract or that issue out of order, and what you are certainly free to speak on is your opinion about deferring this matter for 2 weeks, but we'll have to limit it to that.
OU wants to buy the dogs and cats from the city for $15 per animal. Opponents to the plan say most animal research is outdated and unnecessary. Those against the proposal are especially concerned about cats, because state law does not allow a mandatory stay at the shelter for cats while the owners are being sought. But officials must hold on to dogs at least 15 days before the canines can be removed. City leaders will meet with animal lover organizations before a final vote is taken. Ed Stewart, Action 4.
These farmers are keeping busy, even though they aren't plowing through their fields. It's just too wet. Gene and Terry Pope received about an inch of rain on the land they farm in North Oklahoma County. So they're taking this time out of the field to do some work on a welding unit.
We had a tank leaking and some lines off, and the gas tank was cracked, and we had a bad switch, so we tore the top of the welder off to get to all this stuff, and that's just about what we've been doing today so far.
Like most farmers across the state, Pope desperately needed the rain.
We were real dry. We didn't have any moisture at all, not any to speak of since about June. So we really appreciated what we got. We could use some more, but this is fine. It'll help the grass and the cattle and the hay, alfalfa, such as that more than anything else.
Pope says he'd like to get his equipment out in the field in the next 2 or 3 days and get his land prepared. He hopes to start planting wheat in 2 to 3 weeks. Ben McCain, Action 4 in North Oklahoma County.
There's 3 to 5 Swiss trees.
You got the unions? I haven't seen them move any day so far.
Out there like y'all are.
They're about south of about half a mile south of
countries, it's time to link the
So what are the
Mexican and American
brakemen,
economies
people like that
in
doing?
what one
They-
Governor George Nigh voted about 10:30 this morning. The fate of State Question 553 may rest on how many people follow the governor's example and go to the polls. Public opinion surveys show about 56% of the people in favor of 553. But both opponents and supporters of parimutuel betting say turnout is the key. They agree a large turnout would make passage of 553 more likely. The parimutuel issue has caused quite a stir, but the governor has refused to take a stand on the issue, and he was tight-lipped about his vote today.
I stated 4 years ago when I ran for office as governor and was successful in being elected that I would not take a public stand on parimutuel, that it's a question that the people will have to decide. That's still my position. That's really hard to find.
This is a popular nightclub called Jazzy's, originally built as St. John's Episcopal Church. The club is enjoying a tremendous amount of success, and its membership is constantly growing. Just down at the other end of the block is where businessman Tom Waken works. He says on September 1st, some of the club goers allegedly parked their cars in his parking lot. Waken says attempts were made to move the trespassers by asking the club to announce some 21 cars were going to be towed away. Since the cars weren't moved, they were towed away, and Waken says the next night all the windows on the south side of his building were broken out. The damage came to about $2,400. Waken thinks some of the club goers are the ones that broke the windows, but he holds the club responsible, and Waken has now asked the city council to declare Jazzy's a public nuisance.
It's the result of the club. The club wasn't there, the patrons would be here. I wouldn't suffer any damage. The club wasn't there. They come because the club is here. And they park their cars here. And there's signs along the side of the building, out in the parking lot, along this side, along the front, everywhere you can't park without seeing a sign. I feel that if the club wasn't here, I wouldn't have a problem. So the club is responsible.
The attorney for Jazzy says Waken's request doesn't make any sense under the law.
Mr. Wakens has submitted a petition to the City Council asking that it consider this club a public nuisance. Under the laws of Oklahoma, it takes a great deal more to constitute a public nuisance than a single isolated incident for which the club is not even responsible. The club has no idea who perpetrated this offense on Mr. Waken, and it isn't responsible for it. Any more than any other business establishment is responsible for wrongful acts that occur in its neighborhood.
The Oklahoma City Council has deferred action on Waken's request for 4 weeks. Waken says he has a petition showing area residents opposed to Jazzy's. But Attorney Groves says some addresses on the petition are not even in Oklahoma City. Ed Stewart, Action 4.
Right now, perfectly good, much more sound than quite go that far. In New York, the New York diseases are ones they already have. They are never induced. What they're going to do, except in one case, one of us was told that their research was acute. I don't know what that means. We also want to know how they would be disposed of. We have a euthanasia law.
"13 cars are stolen in Oklahoma City every day. A lot of those cars are never found. Of the 13 cars stolen today, only 4 will ever be recovered. Through August 31st of this year, more than 3,000 cars have disappeared. That's an increase of about 13% over last year.
Until just recently, Oklahoma titles have not been serialized. There's no number printed on them. They just print rolls of blank titles. And it's been in the news a time or two that we've had whole entire rolls of titles stolen. They can take these titles, steal a car, type the title out to that car, and then take it out of state and get a valid Colorado or Texas or another state title to the car, which makes it extremely difficult to recover them.
Macy said car thieves hit the streets either individually or in rings to get what they want. Their targets are primarily expensive sports cars because they provide the biggest return. After all, it's pure profit. No one pays taxes on the sale of a hot car.
Here are a couple of common sense tips if you own an expensive car like this Mercedes. First, keep the car locked at all times. And second, when you park it at night, try to park it in a secure area. It would be a shame to wake up in the morning and find a beautiful car like this one missing. Bill Ross, Action 4 in Northwest Oklahoma City.
Firemen began arriving at the Caston Lumber Company about 10:35 last night to battle the blaze. It didn't take long for the tin warehouse to start falling apart, presenting further complications for the fire department. The wood burned quickly and forced the firemen to shoot water at the building from all angles in an effort to control it. The blaze lasted about 40 minutes. This morning,
The extent of the damage could be seen clearly. One warehouse was completely destroyed. Most of the lumber and some heavy equipment were totally lost. The only thing protecting the rest of the complex from destruction was this firewall. The blaze went no further, but it caused an estimated $400,000 damage. According to the complex manager, the real problem will not be replacing the destroyed warehouse, but rather laying off employees.
We're real concerned because, you know, when you have a fire of this type, you have no job for your employees. And at this point, we just don't know what to do. And we're concerned about our loss. We have an awful lot of equipment loss, and you can see the damages. But we're really concerned about our employees and what we can do to keep everything going for them.
The cause of the fire has not yet been determined, but this isn't the first time Caston has experienced trouble with fire, and officials are not ruling out arson. Kevin Ogle, Action 4.